And as we said, yeah, retailers seem to be shrugging off this idea of the threat of Amazon this festive season. That Deloitte we mentioned saying that most of them expect no issues from Amazon as we head into this very key Christmas period.
Well, are they right to say their concerns for next year or the year after? And this is our starting point for tonight's Taking Stock chat, rather. We're joined by Claire Kimball, founder of The Squiz and former press secretary to Tony Abbott, and Phil Baker, a corporate communications specialist and senior director at FTI Consulting. Good evening to you both. Thanks so much for being with us. Look, do you think retailers are worried enough about the onslaught that they're going to face from Amazon?
It feels to me a bit like Grandma's last Christmas. We're going to come out, we're going to have a great time. It's all good, but next year I think it could be very different. I was lucky enough to talk to a retail expert from the States a week or so ago, and he explained to us how Amazon rolled out in Canada, and it's fascinating that they play the longer game. So you come, you give it a suss out, you get your DCs set up, and then you go for it, and about 4 years in, it's on. So I think we're buying time.
Getting into it now. Yeah, Phil, is this head in the sand stuff by retailers?
Oh no, I don't think so. I think we do shop a little bit differently at Christmas time. There's a deadline. There's that emotional pull. We've got to spend money at Christmas. Like, apart from Scrooge, who doesn't spend money at this time of the year, really, for your family? If anything, actually, what happens is studies show that you actually have a lot of remorse. I think the average spend per person in Australia is around about $700. And what happens is you perhaps buy things on the fly. You're in a hurry. You've taken the kids to see Father Christmas. Then all of a sudden comes January and you see your visa bill and you think, gee, I've spent so much money. And then maybe you sort of pull back. So I think sometimes, apart from those sales in January, February, March can be a little bit bit tough for retailers. But Christmas time, I think you've got to spend money at Christmas time.
But is it what Claire said in that we're maybe just on a delayed reaction from what the US and the UK have just been through, or do you think it will always be a bit different, Australians' shopping habits?
Look, retailers in Australia always sort of say the going is tough. But the odd thing is it doesn't actually stop a lot of offshore players coming down here and opening up a store. Zara, H&M, Debenhams, Lidl, the German supermarket company, they're coming. We've seen Costco and Aldi arrive on our shores. And look, global sort of retailers look down at Australia for many years and have called us Treasure Island, because our margins by global standards are still quite high. So local retailers might find the going tough, but actually offshore retailers look at our market and say, I think I can still make a money down there.
Do we know why that is? Is that just sort of...
Because our local retailers are used to very thick margins. And so, you know...
And the internet changed everything, didn't it?
Well, of course, there is that. And of course, more people are going to sort of spend money online, sort of on their internet and their computer. But unless you actually think people are never going to leave their house, they're going to stay on their couch 24/7 and do all their shopping online, people are still going to go down to the store and go into that sort of shop and have a look around. It's a bit of a social event.
Yeah, well, I can never find a park when I go there. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So big picture optimistic, Phil, fair enough. I suppose looking at this Christmas, though, there seems to be a bit of a misalignment in terms of optimistic, pessimistic. As we saw from this Deloitte report, 83% of retailers say that Amazon won't impact their performance, and they say that they're expecting a pretty solid result this Christmas. Yesterday, however, we saw some numbers from Westpac. The consumer sentiment report showed that a third of Australians intend to spend less this Christmas, and only 10% expect to spend more, with the remaining difference expecting to spend about the same. So, I mean, what do you think? Are they just sort of not meeting here?
Well, and of course wages aren't going up, and the report out yesterday from the ABS saying that we're still under that 3% mark, which is a huge issue. When you're not seeing that money coming into your pay and it's going out in increased bills, I can understand why people are feeling a little bit reticent about it. But of course, it's all going on the Visa card anyway,
well, that's
it seems. True. And household debt and being what it is, I know the last couple of years have been a revelation of carving back my budgets. And it's amazing what you can do with a bit less. And I think a lot of people are really looking at that value proposition at the moment. And I think they will spend. Christmas is the time you get the gilts and away you go. And, you know, you have to be there. But it'll be interesting to see, I think, in those numbers about exactly how generous people are feeling.
Chris, I think one reason why perhaps retailers, one reason why other people are a bit nervous about spending is the wealth effect from the house prices, in particular in Sydney and and Melbourne, where there have been sort of some decent falls in the housing market. So that wealth effect has got probably some economists thinking, look, no one's going to spend money because everyone's house is worth less more. But don't forget, Sydney and Melbourne have been the red hot markets in Australia. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Tasmania, well, their market has actually gone up a little bit in the last 12 months. But the rest of the country hasn't seen those big house price gains that Sydney and Melbourne have.
True, we do spend possibly a bit too much time focusing on Sydney and Melbourne when we're over here in Sydney. There was another interesting story that we wanted to put to you on our Taking Stock panel, because Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff came out with some pretty big comments about social media, comparing Facebook to cigarettes in terms of addictiveness and problems therein. I mean, kind of, the addictiveness is one thing, but the damage done to a society, he's saying, is a pretty big one. Phil, what do you think about that?
I think it was a bit extreme. We know that smoking is very bad for us. We know that smoking can actually kill us. I'm not sure Facebook can actually kill us. It's sure on sort of on a certain level. It might sort of make some people very nervous, and some sort of women I know, more so on Instagram, I suppose, but see shots of everybody up having a great time and sort of looking at $1 million, and they go, gee, what's wrong with me? But if you actually look after that sort of relationship with Facebook, it can be a very good way of communicating with people. I think there's a new actually app called Screen Time that's just come out over the last couple of weeks, and it actually sort of shows you how much time you're spending on screen. So maybe that's a good way of actually saying, gee, I've spent an hour, I've spent 3 hours. I better actually cut back this week, because you don't realise how long you are spending on
it can lock you out if you set your time. It's fascinating.
That's right. So for sure, sort of, I think Facebook, compare it to smoking is just a little bit extreme.
There was a really interesting article. The New York Times did a fantastic investigation of these sorts of issues, and I think one of the big themes coming out of the next couple of years will be this tech clash piece and pushing back on these platforms that are so ingrained in our lives these days. This investigation found that pretty much all the head honchos in Silicon Valley are finding ways to block their kids out of screen time, full stop, whether it's social media platforms, because of the data that they're getting now around this sort of really addictive pull towards screens and how it's blocking kids' inclination, cognition, abilities to learn and grow. So I think if they're onto something, then it's something that we all should be paying attention to. I think adults as well as kids.
Yeah, it's one of the things we just don't know the long-term effects of yet, do we? It's not been around long enough to really be able to tell.
Yeah.
One thing we do know the long-term effects of, and that is water. The Girls of Alexandria has been caught out by a patron for charging $10 a bottle for water. I mean, if petrol costs that much, it will cost $850 to fill your car up. Like, it's a ridiculous proposal for something that's actually free. What do you think of this, Phil?
Look, I think if you'd come to me a few years ago and said, look, I've got this great business idea. What I'm going to do is put water in a bottle, we'll put a fancy label on it, and people will pay more for it than they do milk and petrol. I would have said, yeah, good luck with that. And of course, it's been one of the great sort of businesses of all time, isn't it? It's incredible. If people can afford to pay $10 for water, half their luck. You mentioned wage growth before, Claire. It doesn't seem to stop people spending $10 for water. I think it's actually amazing, but good business for them, and if people can afford it, half their luck, I say.
Well, a friend of mine was dining at an expensive restaurant recently, and they said at the end of the night there was a $40 water bill, and they weren't actually ordering more water. They just kept topping them up, and it was sparkling water.
If it's wine, that's okay. Water, that's a whole other thing.
Claire, what do you think about all this? $10 for a bottle of water?
I reckon you're stupid if you're ever paying $10 for a bottle of water. I mean, honestly, if anyone's actually buying it, you need your head read, I reckon. And interesting to see the restaurants, I think these days, in the old days, the tap water's fine, but if you want sparkling, quite often sparkling's nice with your lunch or your evening meal. Now that's free. There's a lot of people using the SodaStream type systems to give you your sparkling water for free as well. But to Phil's point, I think it's really interesting when you look at the supermarket shelves and see just how much space is taken up with bottled water. It's a reflection of what people are buying. The fact that people pay any money for water just blows my mind. But, good old tap water, it's one of the great resources that we have. It's incredible.
Totally, and we have a bit of fun with this story because, it's pretty crazy. But as you say, in the supermarkets, with all of those bottles there, the single-use plastic is pretty huge on this sort of stuff. Claire, I also thought it was pretty interesting to see the way that the restaurant, or the cafe, I should say, handling the heat, right? They said, cry me a river, I'm not worried about it. What did you think of that?
I thought, look, it's good to be a bit fun with this sort of stuff, and the end point being, we kind of got the wording wrong a bit on that. I noticed that they didn't didn't say we got the price wrong, but we certainly got this idea that it calms your senses and soothes your soul kind of thing was a bit over the top. But yeah, I dare say it'll still be on the menu for $10 tomorrow.
Well, Chris, I think the markup is pretty much standard. I think you can buy a bottle of this particular water in a Dan Murphy's or a shop for, say, $5 or $6. So the markup to 10 is pretty much standard. But, Claire, it's amazing how much people do spend. I think I've read that around the world, we spend $100 billion on this sort of bottled water. And given the sort of, as you mentioned, the plastics and the environment that everyone's so concerned about, when it comes to sort of bottled water, it doesn't seem to worry too many people. It's a lot of money that around the world we spend. $16 billion, I think, in the US alone.
Well, this one was in a glass bottle, and you'd want to reuse that bottle. You'd want to sort of...
I hope so. Get your money's worth. Get the per use down, you know.
The litre in your handbag goes with the thick,
You want to take that
glass.
bottle home.
Yes,
That's right.
and the people who make this water have been rewarded by having their branding plastered
Everywhere.
all over media, everywhere.
That's true,
It's been a win-win all round, really.
Exactly right. Those final thoughts on that. I just wonder. You know, we talk a little bit about the kind of the single-use plastics of it all. Obviously, this one's a bit different because it's a glass bottle. I mean, do you think that the social feeling towards this is going to change? Do you feel like that there's going to be some reactionary legislation that comes in and says, no, we're not going to have shelf after shelf in the supermarket filled with bottles of water like this?
Yeah, the way we've done with plastic bags.
Yeah, that's right. And you can already see some towns banning it. I think there's a town not far from here down the Southern Highlands. I can't remember the name exactly, but they banned the sale of those kind of products from their shelves. I think the incredible thing is how far we've come on plastics in really such a short period of time. It's been such a top of mind issue in the last 12 months even. I think people are so much more mindful, and with the products coming on board where you can actually get a good reusable bottle, I think there'll be that peer pressure where actually buying a bottle will start becoming very uncool. Same coffee cups, I think reusable coffee cups, all that stuff the tide will tip.
Yeah, we're seeing it, aren't we?
Well, maybe we get keeper cups for water.
Yeah.
That's something down the track. But gee, consumer demand is pretty strong, Chris. So I think that idea of not having it anytime soon is probably not going to happen. Demand is there.
Absolutely.
Sure is. All right, well, Phil Baker and Claire Kimball, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks very much.